Hi everyone, it's Justine. This year there has been a wave of fast fashion brands going bankrupt. Forever21 in Europe, Topshop in the US, big names that are suddenly in big trouble. So does it mean that the so-called golden era of fast fashion is over? What are the options for you as a consumer, as a shopper, wherever in the world you are? That's the discussion that I would like to start in today's video. And before we do that, let me very quickly define what fast fashion actually is, to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, because it's not a word commonly used everywhere in the world. What is fast fashion? In a nutshell, fast fashion is a concept created for rich countries, if we're honest. A fast fashion brand will have clothes produced in a less rich country. Then production was so cheap that they can afford to ship the clothes all the way to Europe, for instance, where the living standard is and the costs are higher. And then they can sell these clothes in an expensive store somewhere in London where the rent is expensive, the salespeople are expensive, everything is more expensive. So the business model works because the production costs in the first place were insanely low. It works because there are people buying in rich countries and people producing in less rich countries. It's a system based on inequalities internationally. And even then, the margins for the fast fashion brand are really low because the price tags are kept so low to attract consumers even on a budget. So, if you're a fast fashion brand, you will have to sell incredibly high volumes in order to be profitable at all. Now, if the production costs start to increase, for instance, workers in Bangladesh get a law that says that they have to be paid a living wage. It's not the case right now. They work for a salary that they cannot live off of. Let's assume their salary increases. Still not a high cost factor for the brand in the end. We'll come to that later. Or the shoppers in said store in London are starting to demand higher quality, better ethics, sustainable sourcing. As a fast fashion brand, you will immediately lose your margin, which is small, and you will go bankrupt. So it's a very unstable system with very little buffer in case something happens and something in the equation changes. That is just the summary of how it works. If you want to know more about how fast fashion, how the business model really functions from beginning to end, I recommend that you watch this video, which I did previously. It's linked here and down below as well. In there, I explain, among other things, the breakdown of the retail price of a t-shirt, as an example, how much the garment worker who sews it gets paid, the retailer, the transporter, the brand, etc. If you're new to that topic, I have to warn you, it might blow your mind. But now, back to this video. I want to move on to Forever21, which is the topic in the title, and it's absolutely 100% a fast fashion label. What happened is that Forever21 failed at its own business model, which is quite a thing. The American brand Forever21 filed for bankruptcy. They are closing about 350 stores worldwide out of 800 approximately. They are practically leaving Europe and Asia. They're giving up there. They're remaining active in North and South America, but shrinking big time. So it's really a setback for a brand that once was major. The thing is, the way they filed for bankruptcy doesn't mean that they have to shut down the business. It just means that they are freed of their debts. They don't have to pay their creditors. So the supply chain people, the production people, the suppliers won't get paid. And if you know what I stand for and what I talk about, generally speaking on this channel, you would know what that makes me feel. I'm mad when things like that happen. I think it's so unfair for the people who are before that in the supply chain. Like, they always have the poor cards at the end of the day. Forever21 was once known for trendy fashion and very low price tags. The problem is trends pass. And once you've lost your cool, competing on price is not smart because it will never save you. If you're not cool, people don't want to shop at your stores anymore. So Forever21 is a victim of the business model that they contributed to establishing. Their brand was never really unique. They lost their edge. Price is irrelevant at the end of the day, so they have to start over. Does that mean that we are witnessing the beginning of the end of the fast fashion era? Unfortunately, not quite yet. Primark, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in Europe, is still doing well. Primark is UK-based and currently leading the market for very, 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 very cheap clothes, directed mostly at a very young target group, teens, young adults. Dirt cheap, really. We're talking about, in British pounds, £10 for a pair of jeans, £2.50 for a bra, $25 for a coat. If you think about it for a minute, you wonder how they even do it if you know the price levels in Europe. It seems so low that it's hard to be true. I say dirt cheap, but I should say blood cheap instead. Primark is one of the brands that was having clothes produced in the sadly famous Rana Plaza building factory in Bangladesh. That building collapsed in 2013, killing over 1,000 people. And somehow Primark and others got away with it. Primark targets teens and young adults. How? By relying heavily on the latest trends. There's another UK former flagship retail brand that's called Marks & Spencer, where everybody in the UK used to shop. They didn't set enough on trends, thanks Primark, and they lost their relevance because teens and young adults didn't want to shop where their parents and grandparents were shopping. So Primark is really trying to stay relevant by going for the very, very, very young people and releasing new collections all the time. But now, teens and young adults in Europe and everywhere in the world are becoming more and more environmentally conscious. That's the Greta Thunberg effect. And suddenly they're starting to research and to question the way the fashion industry works. So, a strategic question for the future, Primark. How are you going to do in 3 years from now when your exact target group is going to be a lot more aware and demanding in terms of the clothes they're buying? Maybe they will turn towards more sustainable, more ethical brands, and you will lose your relevance as well. Primark is aware of the danger, which is why recently they started the so-called sustainable line, which means that they source organic cotton. What they don't tell you, though, is that sustainable doesn't mean ethical. It's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to source sustainable materials for your production than to pay the garment workers properly. And they say nothing about that. It's completely untransparent. Actually, if you really want to do things right, you need the sustainable sourcing and you need ethics in terms of how you do your production. So it's really just a marketing stunt meant to buy themselves an image of an ethical brand, when really it's actually one of the dirtiest players out there. Let me be really clear about that. And also this sustainable line is just a tiny part of their assortment. All the rest of what they sell, all the basics, is still sourced and produced the way they used to do it. And trust me, it's not clean. Their sales keep increasing. Yes, they're doing fine for now, but it's artificial growth. It's because they keep opening new stores. Overall, it seems that the fast fashion business model is starting to feel out of breath. It's overheating. H&M has been having difficulties. It's one of the leaders in the market. They launched a new brand which is positioned as a more ethical, sustainable, we don't really know, thing. Topshop is bankrupt in some parts of the world as well. So it's really, it looks like a downward trend for most players. So they're all looking for solutions. If consumers, shoppers, start to demand higher quality and higher ethics, is the solution then to shift to the other extreme and go luxury? Barneys, New York, is bankrupt as well. If Forever21 and Primark are down here in terms of pricing, Barneys is up there. It is the epitome, the most luxurious, high-end, expensive department store chain in the US. I studied in New York, so at my school, they would always say that the holy grail for young fashion designers starting out is to get into Barneys. There was a professor who said once in class, getting into Barneys is the highest sign of recognition that you can get from the industry. If you get your clothes to get sold at Barneys together with Vuitton, Gucci, Chanel, etc., it means that you've made it in fashion. But you know what? I looked into it. The conditions to get into stores like Barneys as a designer are ridiculous. They negotiate the prices super hard. They have you design special things, special colors, variations just for them. They put you on a rack there They won't promote you, so unless you do the heavy lifting, no one will even know that you're being sold at Barneys. And at the end of the season, if they haven't sold everything, they force you, by contract, to buy your inventory back. So 100% of the risk and of the cash flow problems, potentially, is on the side of the young designer. And I always thought, before I go knock on the doors of big retailers like Barneys, I'd rather sell my clothes directly. The fixed cost and the financial risk is a lot lower for me, and the price tag will be a lot lower, so my clothes will also be more affordable for customers, for shoppers. And this system seems like a much better option for everyone, doesn't it? You would think that Barneys selling high price, high-end, high things would have huge margins and then also huge profits, because it's the opposite of what fast fashion is doing. And yet behind that facade of the most luxurious fashion experience, they're bankrupt as well. So where's the solution? Fast fashion brands can't seem to be able to last on the long run. It looks like the system is overheating. But on the other hand, traditional retailers look like they can't sell enough to survive either. So that's a problem somewhere in the equation. And that brings me to a question, or I should say an objection, that I get every time I talk about the topic of fast fashion on this channel. Justine, you're saying that fast fashion is bad, but not everyone can afford Chanel and designer brands. And I have a problem with that argument, because Primark is $5 or pounds or euros, whatever. Chanel is 2,000. Are you telling me that you see no option in between? Because for me, the option is clearly in between. It can't be the price of Primark, because that's not sustainable, that's not ethical, and I think that's not okay. It has to be more expensive than that. And in Western countries, we can afford more. We did afford more before fast fashion labels existed and nobody was going around wearing no clothes. You know what I mean? And then it doesn't have to be as expensive as Chanel. There is a lot of buffer in between and lots of brands that are tackling different aspects. It can be a safer, more sustainable sourcing system with fair trade labels. It can be local production. It can be an ethical production based in Europe. There are plenty of options in between, and I think the option is definitely in between. Now I'd like to send the question back to you. How much is in between? How much are you willing to pay? For what? More specifically, and regardless of the brand you're looking at, I'd love to know how much you would pay, let's say, for a cotton t-shirt basic made in China. How much would you pay for a t-shirt in organic cotton made in Europe? How much would you pay for a t-shirt in recycled cotton made in China? Do you look at the tag? Does the origin or the material influence the price that you're willing to pay? Are you willing to pay more for organic, for garment workers paid properly, protected by European law, for instance? Are you willing to pay more because it's recycled or because it's a new technological development and it will be better for the environment? And why or why not? I will read all your comments under this video. I will try to summarize all the inputs and the arguments you're writing down, and I will present the results of this little survey to you in a future video. So here, really, your opinion matters. If you feel like you want to know more about how the fashion industry works, here and down below, I have linked 2 videos. The first one is the one that I mentioned earlier about how the system works and the price breakdown for t-shirts. And the other one is a video where I explain how you can find out yourself if a brand is part of the fast fashion system or not. Because, spoiler, Forever21 and Primark are by far not the only ones out there. And you have several fast fashion brands in every country you can think of. I will see you very soon in a new video. That's all from me for today. Until next time, take care. Bye.